You're listening to the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. It's fast, fun, free, daily deep dive Bible. And right now, we're talking about Galatians.
My grandpa was a marksmanship instructor in the Air Force. He was at the base here real close to where I live in western South Dakota. And let me tell you, that drill instructor vibe that he had, that definitely followed him home from work. He would get gruff and bossy and bark orders quite a bit. But I think it was mostly all in good fun. Like looking back on it, I think he was kind of riffing on the whole drill instructor thing. Sometimes he meant it, and he would get a little bit gruff with us. But even then, it was endearing. I miss him a ton. He was awesome. He had a goofy sense of humor. He'd make up words and accents and say them at us as though we should know what they meant, but we didn't. I think that really weird, random sense of humor kind of rubbed off on me and my brother as well. The point is, my grandpa was great, if sometimes a little bit gruff. And he would come down to our house with Grandma, and no matter what, there was always going to be something about the way the house was that he was going to look at it and say, yeah, you're not supporting my daughter enough, Matt, or my brother, Marky boy. You guys need to clean the garage. You need to pick up all these apples from under the apple tree. You need to whitewash this wall over here. He was just teaching us discipline. Looking back on it, he was trying to get us to think about other people. But when it was work time, he was real gruff. And he would bark out orders at us and expect us to jump and do things the right way. And it didn't really matter how the right way we did it. He would always go through inspection line. He'd make us line up and, put our hands, pinkies on the seams of the trousers, and he'd go through and he'd find something, and then he'd kind of bark at us. And again, I think he was just goofing around and trying to give to us something that he had seen been effective in forming character in young men in the military. Like I said, he was awesome, and I miss him. But I will tell you this. When he came to town and laid down the law and made us do work, I did not do that work because I wanted to. I did that work because I had to, and there was no getting out of it. He didn't have anywhere else to be or anything else to do. He had it in his head that he was going to teach me a thing. He was a pretty harsh tutor at times, and that work was going to get done. And it was not done out of the warmth and goodness and kindness of my heart. It was done entirely out of obligation and to satisfy the requirements placed upon me. Okay. Now, fast forward a whole bunch. I meet this girl at college. She's going to turn out to be Camilla, by the way. She's going to turn out to be my wife here. I'm getting to know her. She's not like anybody else I've ever met. I'm just crazy about her. We have so much fun together. We can talk about anything. She thinks everything's funny, and we have a great laugh about stuff, but she thinks everything's funny while still being smart and complex and not a pushover. I was crazy about her from the get-go. And every now and then she would need help with something that I was good at. And I noticed that she never had to lay down the law like Grandpa did. She never had to tell me, I expect you to do this thing. If she even hinted at something that I could do that would be helpful, or that somebody could do that would be helpful for her, I was like, yeah, I'm on it because I want to. And you could look at that and be like, oh, that was really selfish because, you knew you would get something in return or curry favor with her or whatever. But I don't know that that's actually true. I think I just really liked her, and the opportunity to show her that or do something, or even, I guess, maybe just say thank you for liking to hang around with me was enough to make me eagerly want to go and do whatever she needed done. Okay, so you think about that contrast. In both situations, there's a task that needs to be done. In both situations, it gets done, but the means by which we get there to doing the good thing or doing the task are entirely different. One is total obligation. One is total gratitude and proactivity and enthusiasm. And likewise, in the early part of the book of Galatians, we're talking a lot about questions of salvation, right? Standing before God. But now here in the last part of Galatians, we're talking about right living for the person who is in Christ, for the person who has right standing before God. We're dealing with the question of, what does it look like to obey God? What does it look like to resist sin? Where does the ability to resist sin and glorify God with your heart and with your actions, where does that come from? Why do good things if you can't impress God by obeying the law anyway? And if you're saved by faith in Christ and the work of Christ on the cross and his resurrection anyway, why would you go and clean out the metaphorical garage that Grandpa wants you to clean out? Well, here at the end of Galatians, we're working through some of that stuff. And I really think that my little contrast, my little comparison I was throwing out there a minute ago, I think it works here. If you are trying to do right and please God because you have to, and you live under the cruel tutor, the harsh master that is the law, that's whipping you into shape, trying to put hair on your chest if you're a dude, well, then you're more likely to have this begrudging sense of obligation that you have to do the thing because that is what is expected of you, and you are under this harsh tutelage of the law of obligation. But if indeed we do have life, as Paul describes throughout this letter, through Christ, through faith, and if indeed, when somebody becomes a Christian, if indeed they do flip from being an outsider to the kingdom, an outsider to the household of God, even a slave and an outsider, if you go from that to being a son or daughter of the king and an heir to the household and an agent of the household, an agent of the king and the kingdom, fully vested in what he's doing, that's a complete flip in motivation. If you're standing on the outside looking in the social class of slavery, you're looking at that and all you can really do is things out of obligation. But once you are you're adopted into that household, now all of a sudden you're doing things for the same reasons that I was doing things for Camilla. I just really like you. I'm just so grateful for this relationship. I'm just sitting here picturing what I was before we met and what I am now that we have. And I would leap at the opportunity voluntarily and with a heart full of joy and gratitude to serve you, to do something. Look, I really think it is that simple when we get into some of this stuff about life by the Spirit. There is a reorientation that happens here. Sure, you can look at the rules of the law and be like, I'm not going to do that thing. I am going to do that thing because the law says so. But if it's born out of the will of the flesh, and if it's happening in the context of that harsh tutor that Paul talks about here in the book of Galatians that is the law, well, Grandpa said to clean the garage got cleaned, but there was something materially different about doing equally hard work or some other task that this girl who I really liked wanted me to do. Or likewise, there's something very different about obeying the law through the work of the flesh and discipline because you're supposed to and that's what you ought to do. And because cursed is everyone who doesn't keep every law written in this book of the law. It's a big difference between that and what we're seeing here with this life of the Spirit. It's kind of back to that idea of free from and free to. Remember, Galatians 5:1, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and don't let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. It's for freedom that Christ has set us free. We're God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. That's from Ephesians, just a couple pages over from where we are in Galatians. Do you see how the one is reactionary, obligatory, and is informed by the status that we hold when we have to do it that way because this harsh tutor says you got to do it that way? And the other is born out of a freedom, not just a freedom from that obligation, but a freedom to go and do beautiful, redemptive things, go and do meaningful things because you want to, because you're grateful, because your heart is full of joy, because you're working on a project to make something that is beautiful, to cultivate something that is awesome, to participate in building or savoring or celebrating the truest, realest thing. You can picture in your life when you have done stuff because you have to, and out of obligation. And you might be proud of how that work went. And you might look back and say, well, it's kind of a weird way of getting there. I had to do it. I had to meet that deadline, but I got it done. And I'm happy that I got it done. But you can also picture things in your life where maybe you didn't, quote, have to in the same way, but you were champing at the bit for the opportunity to do this thing, to take on this task, to engage this responsibility, this challenge, this struggle proactively because you were in a position where you could afford to pick it. You were in a position where you were freed up by circumstances or relationships or whatever to just go grab this thing and do something awesome, knowing full well that even if it didn't go perfectly, everybody involved in the equation would be gracious with you and excited about what you had torn into and what you'd taken a stab at. Again, Galatians 5:1, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free. And then Galatians 5:18, but if you are led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. Look, the easiest way to read that is like, what are we getting away from? What are we escaping from here? All right. I'm freed up from the law. Ugh. Get that burden off of me. But clearly what Paul is talking about here is not just the removal of the burden and obligation, but being freed up to proactively go and live life by the Spirit and attune ourselves or be attuned by the work of God to the values of his kingdom and what he's into and what he's up to and where we fit into it. It's an invitation to creativity and ownership, like true sons, daughters, heirs of the kingdom. The prior state, which is like the one where my drill sergeant grandpa would show up and bark orders and make us do things, is one that tends us to put us in a place where we put all of our thought into avoiding failure. Just make sure you don't screw up. In sports, we say that is playing not to lose, which sounds like it would be the same thing as playing to win. But if you've ever played sports, you know it's not. Playing to win is a mentality that says, I'm going to go grab this. Every loose ball is my ball. Every opportunity is an opportunity that I could take. And there's a huge difference in orientation between the reactionary nature of how one lives when they are under the law, under that harsh tutor, under a set of assumptions that don't bring life. There's a huge difference in how a person acts if you're coming at it that way versus how a person acts when you're coming at it as one who is freed up and vested and secured by the safety net of the love and the grace of the head of the household, the king in this case. There's a huge difference between the way I went about my work when my drill sergeant grandpa showed up and was like, hey, you got to do this. And the way I started going about my work when I got to know the lovely Camilla and detected anything that I could do to show her joy and gratitude and care. And so it is here when we try to avoid the bad stuff and do the good stuff in the one context of obligation versus the other context of life in the Spirit, being free indeed and being in the family of faith. I mentioned yesterday that we're coming up on the end of Galatians and that I'm cooking up a bunch of these real cool achievement unlocked. Now you got Galatians in your hip pocket award stickers that we do at the end of each season. Anybody who's supporting this podcast at any level on any platform, when we finally get to the end of this book and send those out, you're going to get one of those gold stickers that has the cool art that signifies Galatians on it. And there's going to be a handful of you who have gone way above and beyond who are going to get the really awesome limited edition hologram version of that sticker as well. So thanks to everybody who supports the program. Also, high five and thanks for being here. For everybody who doesn't, you don't ever have to do that. I never want you to feel an obligation about anything like that. I'm just super happy that we get to be here together, tackling books of the Bible. All right, that's plenty for now. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour Podcast. Let's do this again soon.